I am a farmer's daughter. I was the last of 7 children. I had 5 brothers and a sister. I did not come from a military family. I did have 2 brothers who were in the Army, one in the reserves, and the second was in the Army, and then in the reserves, but they were both in during peacetime, which is a whole different experience than combat. I went to Purdue, met my husband, we moved to Cleveland, and my son was born, and I've honestly have had a wonderful life. And I can't say that I haven't. I've been very blessed. My son was a character in high school. He's a very funny man, and so he was the class clown. And having said all of that, he was also very bright. But he had attention deficit disorder, and so I used to call him the Energizer Bunny. But he had calculated that he only needed 1 point to graduate on his GPA. And so he messed about until he just had 1 point, and he graduated. And my husband and I were very, very concerned during his senior year about what are you going to be when you grow up. I was fairly certain. I don't know that my son would agree with me, but I was pretty certain that there was no way he was going to make it in college. And so my husband, in a peak of anger, said to him, well, what are you going to do, join the military? And he said, yes, and he did. He joined the Marines. And so in May, it was fine. It was fine that he said that because it was prior to 9/11. And my brother said, the military is great as long as we're not in a war. And I thought, okay, that's fine. I lived through the Vietnam thing, and that was very hard on many levels. So I didn't really, okay, he's going to go to Parris Island. And I really couldn't get over how when he left at 18 for Parris Island, how I cried my eyes out because I never thought I would see him again, and I certainly knew that if I saw him again, it would never be in the same way.
Really?
Really, yeah.
Did you surprise yourself when you cried?
The extent of my emotions just shocked me. I just bawled like a baby, and I'm not a crier, but I bawled. I don't know how many days I just cried my eyes out. And so he went to Parris Island, and that's a tough experience. Sometimes people commit suicide there. People don't talk about that part. They don't talk about the fact that people don't make it. But it is an experience that invariably changes everyone who goes. And so at the end of that training, there was a caravan of his high school buddies and a mother, his soccer mom, because I was never a soccer mom. And I went for his graduation from Parris Island, and he was a skinny kid. And then he went to Japan, and everything was fine. He was seeing the world. And then he was back in Camp Lejeune in Jacksonville, North Carolina, when the disaster hit New York City. And I knew he was gone. I knew he was gone. It was inevitable. He had a cousin who I think he did go to Afghanistan in the Marines as well. But the cousin was a part of a military family, which frankly I don't think changes much. Other than you're used to it, if you ever get used to that kind of thing. And so his first tour of duty in the Middle East was as protecting the embassy in Kabul. And I think it was hard. He was in infantry. He was not an officer, so there was a different life experience. They're two totally different events. His cousin was an officer, and he couldn't speak to Michael because you didn't do that in the military. And they were never in the same group or anything like that, but it's sort of a rule in the military. you see somebody you know, you're a professional, you're not a relative. And so, I mean, Kabul came and went. And then he was called to Iraq. At that point in time, he had re-upped after his second year as a Marine, and he went into intelligence. And he told me, he says, "Mom, I'm fine. You know, I'm as safe as anybody can be." And frankly, that's what he told me a lot, was he was fine. And I go back to what I had said to you earlier. What could I have done if he weren't? There's nothing I could have done. So I immersed myself in my work. And it was easy to do. I had medical students and not a son, and so they became my surrogate kids. You know, I didn't get into the personal lives, I don't mean that. But just having connection with people his age helped enormously, you know. So I didn't think about it. I couldn't think about it. I did meet mothers who would say, "I don't know how you do this." You know, the housekeeping woman, who was wonderful, had a daughter in a miserable place in Iraq. I think there was abuse going on, sexual abuse to her. I think there were all sorts of horrible things going on. And I would often work late, and the mother would tell me about it. And, you know, and the daughter had to have somebody to talk to. And that's sad, that she couldn't talk to anybody else, because all it did was tear up her mother, who couldn't do anything, who didn't have any wherewithal financially, politically. She couldn't do anything except be torn up, you know. And so, you know, we'd give each other hugs every night, you know, it'll be fine, and that sort of thing. My son went back to Iraq the second time, and you know, it was Fallujah, and it was.
So he came home.
He came home periodically. He
Right.
would come home for breaks.
And how was he when he came home?
Tense, unbelievably tense, and he resented the United States, the people.
Why? Did he tell you?
Because our reality is so much different. He would meet young men and women, and he'd get so frustrated because, you know, what am I going to wear today? Was the you know, what am I going to do Friday night? I don't have any plans. You know, whereas he had seen people whose houses were blown up. You know, he had given, you know, they would find people and they would give them over to the Iraqis or to the Afghanistans. And you knew that was not going to end well. He always knew that it wasn't going to end well. So he was very angry and very uptight because he just felt like we in America had no handle on what was going on in the rest of the world. And he was right. I didn't. You know, I walked up to him one night when he was very close to the TV. He was sitting on the floor, and I went to rub his back, and he nearly flattened me. And he said, "Don't ever do that again, Mom." He said, "My instincts are to hurt you, so don't do it." And I didn't. And so I really do believe there is something called post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think they are in the military or in other places, other jobs, under a lot of stress. You know, he said, "Everybody told me I was okay." This is what he told me after he got out. He says, "But you know," he said, "when I went to Fallujah, the person who preceded me was on the same route that he went every day, was blown up when it was a quadriplegic now. So he drove the same roads, he came home, the person behind him was blown up and killed. You know, but for the grace of a higher being, or whatever, I don't know, because, I mean, that's where he was, and, you know, you can say he should have felt lucky. I think he did, but I think when in circumstances like that, you wonder why. Why me?
Right. Sometimes they call it survivor's guilt.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel blessed, truly blessed that he came home. and that he sustained very few injuries. It did take him 6 months at least to get back to being the Mike I knew.